Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of an excessive amount of blank. It could be an excessive amount of layers, volume, instruments, an excessive amount of time if the song is really long. Anything goes as long as we're looking at something with a lot. Today we're going to be checking out some Portal. Definitely a band that I think suits the week. I'm going to dive into this track, Omnipotent Crawling Chaos, from their 2007 album, Outre? I don't know. Let's dive into this though, see what's going on with some Portal. Yeah. The guitar tone is absolutely wild on this. And you can see the volume over there. Little dips on the right side, but mostly just static, held full volume. It's wild to me that the snare is produced like a bass kick. At least I think that's the snare. Of course. Okay. Kind of miss the cymbals, but let's stick with this groove. Let's see where this goes. to the whirlwinds. Yeah. Oh, interesting fade outs. Particularly because it doesn't sound like a traditional fade out. It kind of has a crossfade element to it. I mean, so a fade out is kind of crossfading with nothing, a crossfade into a silent track. But I don't know, something about that felt different, like a transition fade rather than a fade out. It felt like it was going somewhere and then just didn't. I don't usually get that vibe from a traditional fade out. I don't know what to make of that one. Okay, so Portal does this thing. They're loud, they're noisy, they're abrasive, they make otherworldly musics. I'll be honest, 2007, I don't quite think they're there yet. We've checked out Glamorphinel, which I kind of hope that that's from later on in their discography. Now that I say it, but I can't check, so because I don't know what album it's on. So I'm just gonna hope, because when we checked out Glamorphinel, that song stood out to me as something that kind of borders between the artsy, the avant-garde, the experimental, but still what I think could retain a traditional audience too. I feel like experimental music really pulls in people who like new, fresh sounds. Usually that group is very different than a group who likes something that's a bit more standard. There's certainly some crossover, and there's bands that kind of teeter between the two, so they might enjoy, you might find fans who traditionally like one style but do gravitate a little into the other because of specific bands or something like that. But, generally speaking, your straightforward whatever genre, metal, any subgenre, pop, rock, electronic, classical, jazz, whatever, I think you'll find a hard time finding a large group of people, a large percentage of people who really enjoy that traditional sound and also love the avant-garde, the experimental side. Those people certainly exist. I find it, in my experience, to be rarer. And I think Portal walks that line very well, bringing in people from both sides. They're certainly doing something fresh while still definitely playing some blackened death metal. Maybe they're just straight black metal? No, no, they're definitely somewhere in the middle, also wrapped up into an avant garde umbrella. And noise? I mean, maybe. I've only heard two songs from them. They are noisy, but I would not classify this as a noise band. Um, Getting a little off topic here, though. They do a great job of walking this fine line. This one, I feel, walks the line not as well. Or at least, I guess it doesn't, interestingly, stretch out to both sides of the spectrum as well. Is this black metal? Sure. Yeah, 100%. The production is definitely a very raw, blackened style. Is it death metal? Yeah, these riffs are very deathy. The drums fit both genres rather well. Is it progressive? Is it not dissonant, eclectic? Is it avant-garde? Is it experimental? Yeah, yeah, in places. Some interesting use of the pairing of riffs and production to create some unique sounds. But it never really goes in any direction that I think fulfills the needs for any of these groups. It's not quite that experimental. A lot of it is pretty straightforward riffs. A lot of the experimentation comes from the combination of the riffs and the production, but I don't really hear anything in here that feels otherworldly in the same way that I did on that other track. It's also kind of too weird of a production, I think, even for a traditional black metal listener. It is obfuscated. It is difficult to understand. There's a lot of fuzz and buzz and sounds, textures on top of the notes themselves. It is kind of lo-fi in a lot of ways. But it's not done in the traditional way that I feel like black metal typically goes to, and I think even black metal fans would have a tough time getting over the production hurdles here. It's a little bit of both without ever finding the way to balance it in a sense that you can explore both sides to their extremities. And I feel like it just kind of falters for me. And this isn't fair. I'm comparing Portal in the past to Portal of the future. Again, I don't know when that other track came out, but I'd wager it was after this one just because it feels more experienced. It feels more mature, still doing this thing, but to a much higher degree. And I think it's always impressive to experience that too. Like, I'm kind of trashing on 2007 Portal, but I think it's important to remember that I bring this up mostly as a way to explore bands. There's also a little bit of praise here too. I think it's really easy for an artist to stagnate, especially if they get big. I don't know how big Portal was in '07, but you take your big bands, the ones that are known worldwide. They do all the festivals. They're on mainstream radio stations and stuff like that. I think it's really easy to slip into a style, your style, what you've done, because that's what's gotten you your fans. Why would you change that? I think it's really good to point a finger at something like this and say, look, Portal was already doing something interesting here. Look how much they've grown. Look how much they've evolved and refined and crafted their sound without deviating too far from it. I think I said this recently, and I really wish I could remember what video it is, but when we talk about the greats of bands, guitarists, drummers, vocalists, we tend to think about them in their prime, when they peaked, when they were already well known. Everyone starts small somewhere, though. And it's always impressive, I think, to find bands who, or artists, or musicians who were at a point when they had an idea in mind and just lacked the chops to fully envision it. To me, that gives more appreciation for when they do absolutely stick the landing, because you get to see that they've grown. You get to see the ways that they've expanded their skill sets to achieve what they wanted to when they couldn't before. That drive, that passion, that's awesome. It's a good reminder for us, especially, if you make music or if you make any kind of art, you compare yourself to the greats and you're like, geez, I'm not that good. It's always a good practice, I think, to also compare yourself to those people, those bands, those musicians at a lower point in their life. Because they might have been where you were at one point, and that gives you aspiration. Oh, they were the same place as me, and they got up to there with hard work. That's all I need. It's not, I mean, there is skill, there is talent, but it's not something you're born with. It's something you can develop. And I think too often we forget about the process to grow into a great. And we focus just on the fact that these people are amazing. And that can be disheartening at times. So that's where I kind of view this song in particular, is that it's interesting to listen to Portal when they were a little less skilled, when they couldn't pull off their ideas as well. And that kind of makes it difficult for me to talk about, though, in that regard, because I don't really have a lot of positive things to say about it, despite praising that other track I heard from them. There is a lot of heart here. There's a really strong idea. The execution is just weak. The production is too muddy all over the place. It does help at times. Some of these riffs feel like whirlwinds, not because of the notes themselves, not because of how they're played, but because of the lack of attack in the production itself. These notes just sort of form into the sound, one right after another, and you never really hear the picking. The notes just happen. And that creates a very strong fluidity to it, a large amount of legato playing, which is a softness between note transitions. In this case, it almost sounds like the notes are just flowing into one another, and at the speed that they're playing and the rising and falling, it feels just like a whirlpool of sound at times. It's an impressive effect. I think that is my favorite part of this song is those riffs and the way that they feel, the combination of performance and production. But I wonder if the riffs themselves, what they would sound like without the production. I'm sure there's a little bit of spectacle to that given how fast they are playing, but some of these sections I don't know if they would stand on their own, which I don't think is necessarily fair. The song was created with the production in mind, but it is something I think about digging into music. A lot of the times when I listen to music, I don't really hear the music too much. Sure, production techniques are going to catch my ear, whether it's a very high fidelity, lush production or a very muddy, low fidelity production, that kind of stuff. And oh, okay, this is what we're listening to today. All right. Things in the middle I tend to gloss over. It's just produced that way. But when I listen to stuff on the extent of that, that certainly clicks with me. But otherwise, I mostly listen to music in sort of a transposition mindset. I hear the music and I imagine it as sheet music, kind of seeing where the rhythmic elements line up or deviate, when instruments come in, when they rest, what kind of instruments take their place. A lot of the stuff that could be written down onto paper is what I hyper focus on. It's my bread and butter. It's what comes naturally for me to talk about. The stuff that can't be written down as easily, production, guitar tone, and timbre, um, you know, uh, performance, that kind of stuff that's a little harder to notate down for someone to read. Tend to focus on that stuff a little bit less. And so when I think about this song, I tend to think about these rising and falling guitar patterns. The production is a key part of that, but that's also not how I necessarily interpret it, especially on the first time hearing them. And I find that interesting because I think if you take the production away, you kind of just have a straightforward death metal song. It really is their vision of combining this style of music with this production that I think creates something very portal. But there is also the harmonic side of things, which is just that they love dissonant, odd, esoteric note relationships. They aren't always dissonant in that the notes are clashing, but they like to deal with very odd chords to create something that feels, I don't know if unique is the right term, because we pretty much came up with all the chords. They've all been played in 12-tone intonation. So you can't make a new chord, really, unless you start playing around with microtones. But what they do is find the chords that are just rarely used in this context with these sounds, roaring electric guitars. And that's their bread and butter. That's what they like to lean into. It gives the songs, in a sense, an alien feeling. I don't feel like they're used as often on this track. This one certainly feels like it leans onto the metal pentatonic stuff a little bit more, but they were beginning to play around with these sounds that they really work into their music later on. And I think that's pretty awesome. It's once again another way of kind of seeing them expand. Maybe they started out, because this is their third album. Well, they had a split, so it's their second album. This is their second album. Maybe the first one was pure pentatonic death metal. Nothing special about the riffage. And maybe this is where they started to expand their harmonic process a little bit. That opened up the floodgates for the kind of music they would write years later. I don't know. I haven't heard a lot of their library. But it's these kind of things, again, that intrigue me. They interest me. They make me want to dig into the band more. Not necessarily because it's my cup of tea. I'm not going to say I'm a big fan of the writing here, but I just love seeing this growth. And I think that this band has a really nice and easy way of hearing this growth. It's not disguised under anything. You don't have to have a degree in music to understand how they grew. It's right there on the surface. Anyone who listens to them can hear the difference from album to album. And it's cool to kind of see some of that in here. Now, the production, as much as it helps stuff like the guitars, I also feel like it hinders most of this. It's what kind of lost me on a lot of it. It's just really big and loud. It feels like the sound goes way above my head, which is unusual. I don't really get that feeling too often. Even when I talk about very full sound spheres, it sounds like it's generally around, my face area. Headphones definitely help with that sort of imaging and placement, but it doesn't feel massive. The sound here feels like it towers over me. That's impressive, but it also creates a problem because the sound is very compressed and it's lacking detail. Like I mentioned, the picking is pretty much removed entirely. All you get is the notes. Little characteristics like that are removed from the sound entirely. It creates a song that, yes, it does feel massive, but it also feels contained, and that makes it feel small. It feels thin, it feels narrow, it feels right here and nowhere else. We're talking about a song that feels like a single skyscraper rather than a whole city. That certainly works in this case. I think if this is the kind of music you enjoy listening to, or the type of music that you create, if you're Portal in this case, for me, it kind of feels like it defeats the purpose of it. It feels massive, but at the end of the day, it's a very small song for me. That feels counterintuitive. And since the music only kind of leans into this otherworldliness, that also doesn't take me to a new place. And it's part of what makes this so underwhelming to me. I think Portal, if I'd listened to them in release order, I would not have these issues. But because I listened to one of their newer songs first, it is. Because I prefer mid to hi-fi black metal, because I prefer hi-fi music in general. I like songs with very large sound spheres, lots of room to place instrumentation. This just doesn't have it. And compared to what I typically listen to, this feels small, even if it wants to be massive. But the drums, I feel, are just terribly produced. I cannot get behind this at all, even from maybe an artistic or thematic perspective. The drums just sound muddy and disgusting and quiet. They're difficult to listen to. The snare is missing all of its high end. It's pretty much EQ'd to just be mid and bass. It sounds like a bass kick with a little bit of extra crack at the top of it. The snare is a very sharp, directed sound. The bass kick is this massive mallet against a large drum. It has more of a thud to it, more of a rounded tone. That's really the only difference. The bass kick is a little rounder than the snare, but they're kind of encompassing the same pitch area. Kind of this, the snare's even been rounded off on the edges to create something a little softer in tone too. It wasn't until the blast beats that I even realized it was a snare at all. Something about the blast beats, maybe it's the intensity of performing them, brought through a little bit more of a sharper tone to it. Other than that, though, I honestly thought this was a snareless song for at least the first 2 minutes, which I thought was kind of cool to begin with. Not too many metal musicians don't use the snare, cymbal and bass only. Wow, that's pretty unique. But no, it was a snare all along. And I just don't think it really helps the sound. It certainly doesn't help the clarity, which this song isn't going for clarity anyways, but it just never works for me on any level. And when we get the blast beats, when we get the 16th notes bass kicks, this stuff just blurs together. It's really difficult to understand what it's doing. It just becomes a wall, which again is a cool thing. You can certainly do cool stuff with that. And it's an atmosphere that you're not going to get with clearer production. But it never really coalesces into something that feels like a positive for the song. We have certainly listened to muddier mixes of all sorts of metal that I think the muddiness helps sell what the song's trying to do atmospherically, and here it doesn't. It feels like a misguided attempt to do something interesting with the drums and to focus them really hard on a low end sound for some reason, and it just never clicks into anything other than an experimental idea. So that the production just never, and the vocals. I think I heard voices in here, harshes, but there's, I mean, it's tucked into the mix kind of stuff. So honestly, what I remember most out of this song is the guitar riffs and the cymbal work. I really like that cymbal work towards the end of the track. That groove at the end, very cool stuff. I would love to hear modern Portal take a stab at remastering this. How they would make this song with all of the experience they've gained over the years. I think there's a cool idea here. It's just they didn't have the skills, the experience to execute it at the time. And unfortunately, it just means that my relationship to this song as it is just not great. I've heard better. It's not my cup of tea to begin with. And there's just so many missteps I find in it. But I think the core concept, what's on paper, is solid. They just couldn't pull it off at the time. And I feel like it's a rather negative take, but I've tried to turn it into a positive, at least somewhat. The concept of growth and seeing how Portal evolved and how great they are today. Let me hit some lyrics. You can absolutely see Portal's vocalist, though, doing a good job here. I think this is a part where Portal has still grown. I think this is very straightforward compared to some of the stuff that they have done later, but it captures a lot of the vibes and ideas in a good job, a good way. I don't necessarily have a lot of issues with this, other than the fact it doesn't really say much. It takes 18 lines to basically say we summoned this beast, Narathotep, and he's destroying sanity and consuming your cosmos. Now, it's not fair just to break this down and say, oh, they spent all this time to say this. Like, the point of it is to spend the time, to dive into it, to dig into it. And I think that we have a lot of really cool lines in here. The vocabulary is great. Just looking at the first stanza about ripping open a gateway to bring this elder god into our realm. He says, gateways open to a monstrous cataract, explore drifting conjectural lands of ill, abodes of normal implication. No great thought may follow here, atop 7 golden stairs of old cold Kadath. Kadath, I looked up, it's a Lovecraftian area, city of another realm. It's where Narathotep lives, and we are opening this gateway to this place, and it is just a terrible place. It says that there's lands of ill, there's just horrible implications, great thoughts don't go here. Just, not a great place to be. And then we explore what Narathotep does. He masses telepathic sendings of the immemorial master, utter contradictions of all matter and force and cosmic order, omniscient aeon devised through design. So it's describing everything he is. He's a telepath. He's a contradiction of matter, force, and even cosmic order. He defies the laws of existence as we know it. He is totally omniscient. He is complete destruction of all sanity and order. So, this thing is just chaos wrapped up into a god. It says that we summon this machine, the Omnipotent Crawling Chaos. We open our mind to the void to carry forth our desire, that we partake in dreams of madness, that we reveal the non-Euclidean blind nuclear. The outer dark, the forgotten, the whole obscene, transcendent, cosmivorous. That's interesting too. Basically saying at this point, we want this thing to take over. We want it to obliterate our minds. We dream of madness, not just for us, but for everyone. Comparing this mass destruction on the psychic level to a non-Euclidean nuclear bomb. He says, then we will see the outer dark, the forgotten, and the whole obscene. Just blankness. transcendent, to rise up above our level, cosmivorous, which my only take on that would be like, herbivore would be someone who eats, vegetables and of the earth. Well, a cosmivore would be someone who eats cosmos. So a consumer of cosmoses, of everything. That's just wild. I don't know if that's a real word or if they made it up for this, but it certainly captures the vastness of this destruction. Yeah. I mean, as far as like cool imagery goes, this is it. There's not a lot of depth to it. You're not going to find anything that's going to change your life. But it is certainly rule of cool, vivid imagery with fantastic vocabulary. So this, like I said, I think the vocalist still has grown from here, but this is still a fantastic beginning. And just another way that you can see Portal absolutely having a vision at this time, and just crafting it over the years. Very cool stuff. These are my thoughts on Portal's Omnipotent Crawling Chaos. What do you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said? Maybe you want to correct me on some stuff. Maybe you disagree with some of the things that I said. Please put all of that and any other opinions and thoughts you have down into the comment section. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Also, you can head to the link tree in the description. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Like I said, like, subscribe, ring the bell. I just kind of jumped the gun on that one a little bit. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.